Hi everyone, and welcome to Lesson 1 of Translating the Past, Reading Sumerian, teaching through Sumerian grammar, little by little. And I hope you're excited because I am. Learning Sumerian is a lot of fun, like learning any other language, particularly a language that is ancient and that can unlock things from the past. I hope you'll have a good time. And as we go through this, please let me know if you think we could cover things a little differently or make things clearer. I want this to be very open from a communicative standpoint. So let me know. Give me your feedback. I wanted to open with talking about a trip that I took to the British Museum years ago, and it was after I had learned Sumerian, and I remember looking through the glass and seeing this and saying, I can read that. And it was a lot of fun to sit there and read through the glass. I'm sure that people thought that I had mental issues, but it's okay. But I was very excited. It's a really good feeling to be able to look back at an old text, to look at a text, something that's written in a funny looking script, and to say, I know how to read that. And really, to read something like this, as difficult as it may seem right now, it's actually not too bad. And I think it's very reasonable to assume that if you watch these videos and you stick with this program, it won't take you very long to not only read what these types of inscriptions say, but to understand why they say it. So, and why they say it, what the grammar behind it, the grammar and the syntax. So lesson 1, we're going to look at essentially 3 different things. Number 1, how cuneiform signs work in general. 2, we're going to look at nouns, the characteristics of nouns. And then we're going to look at adjectives. And believe me, this will be a lot for one lesson, but I think it's the appropriate amount to give in the beginning. And afterwards, we're going to look at some exercises, and I'll put these up. Maybe we'll link it to Google Drive. I'm not sure. Megan will tell me how I'm supposed to do that. But there are exercises that are at the end of this PowerPoint, along with drawings of cuneiform signs, initial cuneiform signs. So you'll be able to work on your own at home. And of course, email in questions or your work if you want me to check it, your translations. It should work pretty smoothly. Now, before we get going, I was thinking about this actually just a few minutes ago. I want to make sure that we set our expectations correctly here, and I want to lay down some, I don't want to call them ground rules, but yeah, that's kind of what they are. I've been working with ancient texts now for a long time, and one thing that I find over and over again when I teach ancient languages, I've taught Hebrew, I've taught Greek, I've taught Aramaic, I've taught Akkadian, Sumerian. Every time that I teach an ancient language, particularly at an introductory level, I see very quickly that there are people that want to take that little bit of knowledge that they have and run wild with it. And I want to caution all of you against doing something like that. I'll tell the story about when I was teaching Greek in seminary. I was up at the board before class started, putting some exercises up on the whiteboard, and I heard two guys, probably in their late 20s, sitting in the front of the class having a discussion. Now, these were first semester Koine Greek, Biblical Greek students, right? They probably knew some verbs and some nouns, and they could do some very basic translation from the Greek. And I remember the two of them. One was saying, you can see here from the Greek that Romans chapter 9 proves conclusively that God predestinates people to heaven or to hell. And the other guy said, no, the Greek is very clear that man has free will and that man can lose his salvation. And I wanted to turn around and slap the two of them upside the head, not literally, but, and say, look, just shut up. You two don't know Greek enough to make this argument, okay? You have so much to learn. Just sit back, and be patient, because neither of you have the expertise to make the assertions that you're making. And this sort of thing is just all too common. And so I want us to be able to balance as we go through this. On the one hand, not setting these super high, unrealistic expectations of ourselves that we're going to become, great Sumerologists and be able to translate through, difficult poetic texts within 2 or 3 weeks and make, great discoveries and, write papers. I mean, obviously that's really ridiculous, but I want us to set our expectations at a reasonable level. But I also want to balance that with not thinking that this is going to, learning Sumerian is some extraordinarily difficult and unattainable goal. In reality, again, after going through several of these lessons, I mean, if you really apply yourself with even a reasonable amount, I think you'll be surprised at how much you can translate and what you can work through. And maybe even more importantly, how you can evaluate someone's argument, even if that just means to evaluate their argument enough to know that they don't know Sumerian, or they can't read the text, perhaps like they're claiming. So let's try to balance that. I would hate to have anybody watch this video and think, well, there's no way I can do this. There's no way I can learn Sumerian. But I'd also hate to hear about somebody saying, well, I've watched 2 of Josh's videos and now I'm taking on well-established ideas in Assyriology and retranslating Sumerian text because I know Sumerian now. Let's try to stay somewhere in the middle. Okay, enough of that. So let's start with how cuneiform signs work. Well, if you watched Megan's video on how cuneiform works, you know that a single cuneiform sign, can represent at least 3 different things, depending on the context. 1, it can be a word. For example, this sign here, the dinger sign or the on sign, can just mean heaven. If you see it, it can just mean heaven. It can also mean God, but here we'll just say it can mean heaven. A2, by the way, you'll hear some of these pronunciations. The letter E, we pronounce A. I know that sounds strange. I don't know how to reconcile that. I'm sorry. And when we say 2, that means that they're, well, don't worry about it. I'm just reading the subscript. I'll explain in another video what the 2 means. Unless Megan already did. No, she didn't. Okay. So A2, just for now, means house or temple. So this sign, if you see it, can just mean a house or a temple. Gal, that sign right there, can mean big or great as an adjective. And so, words, the sign can just represent a single word. Other words are mu, which can mean name or year or a text. Ah, so water. Lugal, which means king. Nin, lady. So it can represent a word. However, a single sign can also represent a syllable. So that same sign that we saw in the last slide, the on sign, while if you see on, it can represent the word for sky. For sky or for heaven. It can also be the syllable on in this. This is a verbal chain. I'll explain what that means in Probably not the next lesson, but it doesn't matter here. You can see that it's part of a string of signs. It doesn't mean heaven here. It's just the syllable on. So ga on do 11. This is another verbal chain. And mu, even though mu by itself could mean name or text or year, here it's just a verbal prefix. So it's used as a syllable, mu. Mu un do 3. And the same thing here. The word shesh means brother. So shesh ani, here does not mean water. It's being used as a syllable. As part of, I think Megan talked about this in the last video, ani means his, and so this says, his brother. If this is all a little hazy right now, you're right on track. You don't have to understand all of this. I'm just trying to give a basic introduction to how different signs are used. So it can be used as a word. It can be used as a syllable. By the way, when you start to translate, this will all become very clear very quickly. So a word, a syllable, or it could be used as a determinative. So a determinative, as Megan explained, is a word that is used. It's a sign that's used to indicate that what follows it or what comes before it belongs to a certain class of nouns. For example, that sounded really complicated. That on sign that we talked about, the thing that looks like a star, it can also mean dinger, which means God. Well, if you see the dinger sign before the sign for Inanna, who is, I'm sure many of you know, a goddess, the script is telling you, hey, the word that's coming is the name of a goddess. So dinger, we put it up in superscript there as a D. Dinger Inanna means the dinger sign is being used as a determinative. We call that a divine determinative. The word ki means like earth or ground. But here, if it follows a city name, the city of Eridu, for example, or Uruk, if it follows a city name, they'll put the word ki, and that means that, hey, what went before was a city name, so we superscript that as well. The same thing with the word for bird, which is mushen. If mushen comes after something, a lot of times it's being used as a bird determinative. So the Anzu bird. So Anzu mushen would be superscript the mushen, and that tells you that what comes before is a bird. And the same thing with wooden objects. The word nish, by the way, if you see I guess I should probably talk about that as we go through here. If you look in, where's my mouse? Yes. So if you look here at the S with a little caret on top, I think is what it's called. That's the SH sound. Instead of us writing M-U-S-H-E-N, mushen, we just write this S with a little V on top, so mushen. If we do it an inverted V or whatever, or a little circumflex looking thing, because it kind of goes down and up like a sine wave, above a G, that's the N, N-G, N, like a nasalized G sound. So nish, nish. This is really important. I'm just kidding. Anyway, nish means wood. And so if you put the wood sign before a word, oftentimes it means that noun, which here is guza, a guza is a chair or a throne. And what this is telling you is that this is a wooden object, a wooden chair or a wooden throne. So these are called determinatives, and they determine what class the word belongs to. So nouns can, a cuneiform sign can represent just the word itself, like A2, house. It can represent a syllable. Well, let's use on, for example. I think that's the one that Megan used. On can mean heaven or sky. As a word, it can mean on as a syllable, so ga on do 11 as part of a verbal form, or it can be a divine determinative because it also means dinger, which makes sense, right? Sky, heaven, God, those things are all related. And the word for God is dinger, and so we superscript a D if it's a determinative to tell you that that is a divine name. Okay. If you're a little confused, that's fine. The nice thing about these videos is you don't hit rewind. Boy, I just dated myself. You can click back, rewind. Anybody remember VHS tapes? Be kind, rewind. Man, I'm really dating myself now. Okay, I'm going to move on. Megan's laughing at me. As well she should. Love you. Okay, how do I make my mouse go away? I'm going to do that. So you can't see it. You can, but I will. Okay, so nouns, in certain languages, many languages, we have masculine nouns and feminine nouns. You don't have that in Sumerian. What they do distinguish, though, is animate versus inanimate. So something living versus not living, right? Or that's not terribly important. I just want to point that out. But there is no masculine or feminine distinction. Now, what kinds of nouns are there? What types of nouns are there? Well, there's a single sign noun. We've seen lots of those today already. A2 for house, lugal for king. By the way, lugal comes from, see, I brought my mouse back there. Lu2 means man or person, and gal means big or great. So lugal is a big man, right? A big person, so it's a big man. It's a king. Okay. Sorry. You also have compound nouns. So a dub sar is a scribe. Dub is a tablet, and sar means to write. So a tablet writer, that's a scribe. A2 gal is it's a palace. It's a big house, right? Go figure. So those are compound nouns. What I mean by that is you can see there are two signs that go with it. Compound nouns. So single and compound. Anyway. Plurals. How do they make words plurals? Well, I'm sorry, but nouns in Sumerian by themselves can either be singular or plural. So lugal, depending on the context, could mean king or it could mean kings. They don't always distinguish whether it's something singular or plural. Now, they do have a way of doing that. They just don't always do it. If they put ene at the end of a word, that's a plural suffix for animate objects. So here, and we'll talk about why there's an R here in just a second, but dinger, re, ne, you can see the ene. See it? And if you normalize it, I think Megan talked about that in the video, you have dinger, period, ene. That's the ending. So dinger, ene, gods. Oops. Sorry. They also can reduplicate words. So if you write lugal, it can mean king or kings, but lugal can mean kings, or more often something like all the kings. And they can reduplicate the adjective. We're going to talk about this in just a minute, but the word gal here is an adjective meaning big or great. We've seen that a couple of times. So lugal, gal would be great king. If they write lugal, gal, that means great kings, plural. Hope that makes sense. So those are nouns. I know we're going through this a little quickly, but it's the nature of making a video. See, if we were in class, you'd be raising your hand and saying, oh, Josh, can you explain this a little more? But we're not. Rats. We'll do a hangout. Maybe that's what we'll start doing. We'll do some Google Hangouts or something, and you guys can do your exercises, and then we'll all come back together, and you can ask me questions. We can go through the exercises. Man, that's an idea. I probably shouldn't think out loud like this on a video, but anyway, let me know what you think about that. So we've talked about nouns. We've talked about how cuneiform signs work in general. Now let's look at adjectives. Now, adjectives almost always come after the noun. So we talked about Lugal Gal, great king. Lugal is king, Gal is great. So the king, the great one, right? That's kind of how that's being done. Of course, a number of languages that you know of do that as well, so nothing terribly surprising there. Now, usually, even though we didn't see it in my first example, usually an adjective will appear with an a suffix. And this is where we want to talk about that. If we go back, this R right here. Why is there an R? Well, let's talk about it here. So nita, where's my mouse? There it is. Nita means man or male, and kala is mighty. And there's your A, and the A is attached to the kala, the adjective, to tell you this is an adjective. Okay. Now, why is there the ga sign there? Why is it not just the ah sign? Why is it ga? Well, there are things that we call Auslauts. Nice German word. And what they are is there are... Sorry, Oliver's crying, and it threw my train of thought off for just a second. Poor guy. Auslauts, there are many words that when they end in a consonant, so for example, let's go back. Dinger ends in an R. Oftentimes, when they want to put a vowel after as a suffix on a word that ends in a consonant, they will reduplicate the consonant before they put the vowel. So instead of saying dinger ne, they will often write dinger re ne. So essentially, if my mouse will come back, you can ignore the R here, right? And the same thing is true here. Now you might be a little confused. Hey, kala doesn't end with a G. Well, it does. They just don't always write it. That doesn't make much sense. I'll explain that later. But kala is a word that has a G sound at the end. So sometimes you'll see it written kala. Sometimes you'll see it written kalag. That do 11 sign, du with a subscripted 11, that has a G auslaut, just like this one does. So do 11, you'll actually see something written do 11 ga, like you see it here, because it has a G at the end, and that's what they're doing. They're reduplicating that G sound to put this grammatical suffix on the end. So that's all that is. So you can see it here. Kalag, ga, gal, la. So if you have gal, they will often write la instead of just gal, ah. And here, so I didn't have to go back. Man, I'm good. If I just look down, dinger, re, ne. So they're just reduplicating the R here. So again, you can just sort of ignore it. You can ignore the L, you can ignore the G, and just look at that vowel. So, some adjectives don't always need the A. Some of them appear without it really ever. So as you can see up top here, Lugal Gal, great king. The Gal there doesn't require the A to indicate the A suffix to indicate that it's an adjective. So sometimes you'll just say Lugal Gal or Lugal Tor, which means small, or Lugal Mach, which means magnificent. They won't show up all the time with an A at the end. So don't be surprised if you see it with an A. If you don't see it with an A, don't be surprised. It can occur either way. You'll find, though, that some adjectives occur almost always with an A. Some adjectives almost never occur with an A. And it just comes with reading. Now, that's basically it for the first lesson. So what did we learn? We learned how cuneiform signs work in general, that they can be words by themselves, they can represent syllables, and they can also represent determinatives. We learned the basics about nouns, so simple nouns, compound nouns, how to make plurals, something else I can't remember. And then we learned how adjectives appear, that they come after the noun. A lot of times they have an A after them, but there are some adjectives that don't have an A at all. They just stand by themselves. Now, vocabulary for this lesson. I know that looks a little scary. Let's go through it. Let's start at the top here. So atu or A2 is house. Lugal, king. Nin is a lady. We talked about Dubsar, the tablet writer. That's a scribe. Gal means big or great. Tor means small or young. Nita tu, so you see it there, Nita tu. Nita tu means man or male. Ama means mother. May 3 is battle or combat. Kala, kalag, means mighty. Kor means mountain or like the enemy lands. It can also mean the netherworld, but usually it's like a mountain. Khorsang, so you hear the NG at the end of song. Khorsang means mountain as well, but it can mean steppe, but it's mountain. Mach means magnificent. Come on, mouse. Dumu means sun. Dingir means God. And Orsang means hero. So what I would recommend doing with these vocabulary words is creating some flashcards. So that can be as simple as, getting some 3x5 flashcards and writing A2 on one side and house on the other. Sorry, I know that sounds really basic, but it can be very effective with this sort of thing. There's also a program called Flashcards Deluxe, and I use this during my doctoral work, and it's actually really easy to use. It's not terribly expensive. I don't know if it's for non-iPhone devices, but it definitely is for it. It probably is, but I have an iPhone. But you can go into an Excel spreadsheet or even a Word document and type out words on one side in one cell, and then in the next cell type in their meaning, and then upload them to their website. And actually, I can do this. Maybe that's what we'll do. Let's talk about that. Send me some messages. Tell me what you think. But maybe what I'll do is I'll take the vocabulary lists each time I put a video out, and I'll upload them to Flashcards Deluxe. And then if you have the app, I'll give you the name of the deck. That's what they call it, the flashcard deck. And you can go on and download that, so you don't even have to enter them in. I'll enter them in for you. And I'll call them, I don't know, Digital Hammurabi. We'll see. I'll figure out what to call it. But let me know if that's something that would interest you guys. But I would recommend, as we go through this, try to memorize these words. It'll really help you when you translate. Try to memorize these vocabulary words. I'll try not to give you too many at a time. And I'm going to make a separate video on how to use the online dictionary that we have, the Electronic Pennsylvania Sumerian Dictionary, EPSD. I'll put a daily data out about that. And you can look these words up on your own. But again, it's a good idea with any language that you learn to memorize a good base set of vocabulary. So here are the exercises. I want you, it's very simple, to go through and write these out, or if you want to print the slides, that's fine, and write next to them the translation. But go through and translate what each of these things say. So number 1, A2, what does that mean? Lugal, what does that mean? Lugal mach, what does that mean? And just go down through here and give me a good translation. Again, shouldn't be too difficult. If you have questions about it, please, I think the best thing to do would be to try to answer them yourself on your own. And then if you go through the whole thing and you have questions still, shoot me an email and ask, ask your question. Say you don't understand why something is the way that it is. I think that's probably the best way to do this. And then finally, let's look at our first set of cuneiform signs that I want you to try to memorize. Okay, now there's a really good resource, Mittermeier's Old Babylonian Sign List, and I'll put in the description the information about the book. It's a really good book to have if you're going to study Sumerian at all. If you really are going to study it seriously at all, it's a good book to have. I have drawn the signs myself, so I can put them up here. So I apologize for them not being exquisite and beautiful, but here they are. So, upper left, that's the on sign. It's also read dinger. That's the mach sign. So you can, I don't know if Megan, can't remember if she talked about this. There are basically two types of wedges. There's a wedge that's straight and it has a triangular head, and they can go horizontal, they can go vertical, they can go diagonal. But then there are these things here that are called Winkelhaken in German. And so you can see they look a little bit different. So there are two here. These are Winkelhaken here. Right. So you can see how they're making the shape. They're taking the stylus, they're pushing it in, and then they're making the Winkelhaken. And they're impressing these shapes. So this is the Mach sign. This is the Gal sign. This is the Dumu or Tor sign. This is A2 for house. This is the Kor sign for mountain. And then this is Kala or Kalag for mighty. So I guess that's it. Again, I would recommend watching this video. Pause it when you need to. Take some notes. Maybe print out the slides and take notes on them. Whatever's most efficient for you, most effective for you. But try to make flashcards of these signs. Maybe, draw them yourself if you want. Or, of course, you can take screenshots of them and make flashcards electronically that way. Whatever's best for you. But try to commit these things to memory. Try to commit the vocabulary to memory. Do those exercises and sort of think through the lessons. And I think that'll put you in a really good place for the next lesson. And we'll start to actually go through and read some inscriptions, some basic inscriptions. And I think really you'll find that it's going to be easier maybe than you anticipate. And pretty soon you'll be reading royal inscriptions and patting yourself on the back for being amazing. Anyhow. Okay. Thank you guys so much. And please, again, email me, digitalhammurabi@gmail.com or digi_Hammurabi at Twitter. You can, I was going to say Twitter us. That's not what you do. Tweet. God, I'm old. I'm sorry. Anyhow, or of course you can just comment on the video. All right, that's enough. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you later.